what does hope mean to me? Well, we know hope means healing on purpose and evolving. But for me, hope means something else. It means hold on, pain ends. And we can't forget that at the end of the day, the struggles, the strife that we feel will come to an end. That's what gives us hope.
Hope to me is knowing that there's a light at the end of every tunnel, and that no matter what I'm dealing with, I will find a way to get through it.
Hope for me is trusting that there is always possibility and knowing that every possibility is an opportunity for greater. Every storm eventually runs out of rain.
Good morning, good afternoon, and or good evening. No matter what time you're tuning into this broadcast, guess what? It's a beautiful time for you to live your best life by healing on purpose and evolving. As you enter, similar to what you saw in the video, go ahead. Tell us, what does hope mean to you? Before we go into the broadcast today, it's important for us to tell you a few quick and easy announcements from the Hope Center. Those announcements are as follows. Make sure to check us out on the web at www.hopecenterharlem. Whenever you check us out on the web, you will learn about a lot of different programming that we have here, including mindfulness moments every Tuesday at 12 o'clock p.m. noon on Facebook Live, and the virtual live check-ins at 12 p.m. noon on Thursdays, also on Facebook Live. While you're on the website, make sure to click the subscribe button. If you want to go directly to the newsletter and figure out your way to subscribe, go to www.hopecenterharlem.org/subscribe to stay in the know on all things Hope Center. If you would like to support the good work of the Hope Center, make sure to click the donate button or go to hopecenterharlem.org/donate. Your support helps give 10 free therapy sessions and couple and family counseling sessions to innovators around Harlem. Also, guess what? The Hope Center has new merch for you and your loved ones. Visit our online retail store and place your order today. Free shipping is applied at checkout on all orders $50 or more, with the exception of our Be Human boxes. No code is required, and guess what? Curbside pickup is now available. Just select pickup at checkout. Happy shopping! Also, make sure to follow Hope Center Harlem on the web, whether it's Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter. You can find us on Facebook and Instagram at Hope Center Harlem, and on Twitter at Hope Center Harlem, with center spelled CTR. Last but definitely not least, if you ever have a moment where you feel like life is over, where you feel like there's nothing that you can do, where you feel like you need to talk to someone, guess what? You can text Worthy to 741-741. That's the Hope Center's crisis text line. And guess what? It's open 24/7, it's confidential, and most of all, it's free. Today is going to be yet another beautiful, wonderful, magical conversation brought to you by Hope Center Harlem. Today's conversation is called Love Notes, Principles for a Lasting Romantic Relationship. Tonight's conversation is brought to you by the Executive Director of the Hope Center Harlem, Dr. Lena Green. Dr. Lena Green is a clinical social worker, psychotherapist, and fatherhood practitioner. In her more than 20 years of direct practice and management experience as a clinician, professor, and administrator, Dr. Green has had a tremendous impact on countless New Yorkers. She is skilled in various areas of mental health, program planning, clinical supervision, and building strategic partnerships. Ladies and gentlemen, and our beautiful innovators, it is without further ado that I introduce you to your host, your person that's guiding this train for today, Dr. Lena Green.
Hello. Thank you so much for joining us for this critical healing conversation entitled Love Notes on tonight. We thank you. We have some very special guests in the house, and we look forward to having a really exciting conversation. Don't forget to drop in the chat where you are tuning in from this evening, and also to let us know, what does hope mean to you? What does hope mean to you? So for me, while we're waiting for some of those folks to pop up on our screen, hope is a feeling of expectation in the face of uncertainty. So Shamel Flowers is tuning in from NYC, and hope to her is the anticipation on a wish or a desire. Michelle Morgan, says that the possibilities of a better outcome is what hope means to her. And Ruthie is tuning in, and Ruthie says, hope for me is an endless belief of encouragement, transformation, and evolution of circumstances and life. Wow, these are really powerful statements here. And we'll take one more from Victor Allen, who says, hope is knowing just because you don't come out of something, you can come through it. So we thank you all for dropping that in the chat. We are delighted to get started with all of you and give a warm welcome to our guests for tonight. And we have Pastor Michael Warren and Reverend Dr. Lakeisha Warren. So Pastor Michael A. Warren Jr. is the senior pastor of First Corinthian Baptist Church, also known as FCBC, in Harlem, New York. Warren, affectionately known as Pastor Mike, is quickly rising as one of the most prolific and sought-after teachers and preachers in the country. Considered a visionary, cultural architect, and game changer by his peers, Pastor Mike has not only catalytically changed the traditional perspective of the Black church, but he is also shifting the paradigm of Christian understanding and culture. Let's give a warm welcome to Pastor Mike. All right. So next up, we have the Reverend Dr. Lakeisha Warren, educator, visionary leader, sought-after speaker, and consummate change agent. Dr. Lakeisha Warren is a force faithfully encouraging those she encounters to embody their infinite possibilities. In June of 2019, she became the first woman and first African-American woman president of New York Theological Seminary. She is committed to preparing faith and thought leaders to engage relevant, restorative, and revolutionary ministry. You all help me give a warm welcome to our esteemed pastors this evening.
Good evening. Good evening.
Good evening. How are you both doing on today?
Doing good, doing well. Long day, but excited about this conversation. How about you? How are you doing?
Doing pretty good. Grateful and super excited for tonight. We have been planning our healing conversations over the past few months, and we are delighted just to have you on with us tonight. We know that you are both so busy, and so we are so grateful for an opportunity to talk to you.
Well, thank you so much for the opportunity. It is always a blessing to be talking to our FCBC family and friends and others who may be watching tonight, and looking forward to how God is going to bless us all in this conversation.
Amen. Amen. So we'll give a few seconds to see if Pastor Mike will come back and join us. I think we may have lost him, the connectivity there. But in the meantime, Pastor Lakeisha, if you can, I was going to say if you can get us started, but I just with the audience today. So I'll wait for those to pop up on the screen so we can share that out. A few facts. So a healthy marriage is good for your immune system. I bet most folks did not know that. Okay. A 15-year-long study found that a person's happiness level before marriage was the best predictor of happiness after marriage. In other words, marriage will not automatically make you happy. Okay, that starts from within.
That's good.
Okay,
that's true.
Yeah. Oftentimes we look for other people perhaps to complete us, right?
Yeah.
And so we have to make sure that we have our own notions of who we are and have enough love for ourselves before we can share that with other people.
Yeah, it's true. It's absolutely true. I have so many people, so many folks who've had conversation with me and are saying, "Yeah, I want him to make me happy, or I want her to make me happy." But your happiness is too valuable to put it in the hands of someone else. You know, that Jesus joy is between you and God, and so I wouldn't want to put that responsibility on anyone else, and wouldn't want anyone else to put that responsibility on me. Ultimately, we as individuals have to be responsible for our own happiness. Our partners can make it a little better or make it a little more challenging, but it is not their responsibility to provide us with that. So yeah, that's good. I like that. That's good.
All right. Yes. And so we have two more facts that we'll draw upon before we get started. So more than friendship, laughter, forgiveness, compatibility, and sex, spouses name trust as the element crucial for a happy marriage. So we're going to talk a little bit about some of those ingredients that I'd like you to share a little bit later, but I just wanted to lift that up as well. And then I think we have one more. So due to jobs, kids, TV, the internet, hobbies, and home, and family responsibilities, the average married couple spends just 4 minutes a day alone together. That's interesting, right? So we have, I think, it's a testament to the fact that we have so many competing priorities that when we think about an opportunity to invest in our partner, get alone time with our partner, not much of that time is left over. I think we have to think about how do we make time to invest and ensure that we are cultivating the relationships with our partners as much as we are investing and cultivating the relationships that are also around us with our children, with our work family, and other things. Okay. So,
I was having technical difficulties.
So he had to come squeeze at my place, in my space. Another part of having a effective and love-giving marriage is being able to share your Zoom space, your live stream, your StreamYard space.
Yes. Well, what a nice and delightful surprise to see you both on the screen together right there.
We were trying to get elbow room. I went to another place, but the universe didn't want us to be separate for this conversation.
Oh, look at that.
Clearly, that's what's going on here. So here I is.
There he is.
All right. Well, welcome back. We're glad to see you back on the screen. So many of us may know your story, but for the people who are joining us for the first time, can you share a little bit about how you two met and how long you've been together?
Which version do you want? You want the real version or Reverend Lakeisha's version?
Really?
Well,
see, that's how we're starting tonight.
Perspective, right? So why don't we hear both perspectives? How about that?
Yes, I'll let Reverend Lakeisha give her.
No, you go ahead, since your perspective is,
Well, we met now 32 years ago.
You getting old.
32 years ago, we met in 1989. And we started dating officially November of 1989. Mm-hmm. And I was, before that, we started officially dating November. But before that, I was a freshman class president, and my wife was a freshman class vice president at Spelman. And I was coming to her dorm with some of my guys who were part of the cabinet. And I saw her working she was doing her work study, working at the front desk of the dorm. And so, I inquired and, found out who she was. And then I came back to the dorm. I was actually coming to see another young lady, by the way. And I came back to the dorm and I ran into her. And so, I thought I was going to try to put my moves on, you know what I'm saying? I was going to try to, holler at her. And I did my little, had my little conversation for her and all that stuff. And she was like, and I saw her writing down her number. I was like, bam. And then she was like, could you do me a favor? I was like, yeah. She was like, could you give this to so-and-so? It was another person. She want me to give her number to another dude. I was like, wow. I was, okay. So I'm thinking I was really been rolling. I didn't even have to ask for the number. And so needless to say, the other dude never got the other number. Or got her. I kept that to myself and used it like the next day. And that was that.
Okay.
Meanwhile, he didn't tell me that he never gave the other guy the number until after we were married. So I spent the rest of my time avoiding someone who I thought had gotten my number and never called me. But later, in fact, found out after we were married that the person never got my number.
What was you avoiding him for? You had me. You didn't focus on me. You had to avoid nobody. You just focus on me. You was void. No.
Well, somebody was clear from the very beginning, those 32 years ago in 1989.
Yes.
It didn't take him long to win me over, though. That phone call the next day, it was the start of something special.
We was on the phone for like how long?
About 2 hours.
About 2 hours on the phone. I was like,
okay.
Look, I was like, it's casting, just,
Reeling it in.
Uh-huh.
Okay. So 32 years is a long time by some standards. So if you both could name, if we could sort of think about lasting romantic, relationship as a recipe for success, right? What would be some of the ingredients that you would both name that you think are important to long-lasting love?
Oh, let's hear it. Go ahead. Give me a 3.
I'll start with, how about I do one and you do one?
No.
We can do it like that.
All right.
So I think definitely innovation and creativity are really, really important in any relationship because the longer you are together, you've gotten a chance to grow older. You've learned some new things. You're shifting. We're always shifting and evolving and changing. And so as we recognize the things that are different about ourselves now, as opposed to 5 years ago or even 1 year ago, having the capacity to accept the other person as they change, to encourage and inspire them as they change, and recognizing the own changes that you're undergoing in the relationship, I think are important. And then as those changes begin to emerge, being able to be creative and innovative in the relationship, doing things that you've never done before. There were things that I loved when I was 20 that I really just don't have time for, in my 40s. And so recognizing and expecting change to come and knowing that is a part of life and part of marriage, and also incorporating what can we do about the changes that we're seeing with one another. So I think that, you can't keep doing the same thing expecting a different result. You have to be creative and innovative in how you talk, how you communicate, and really every aspect of the relationship.
Yeah, I think, she covered a whole lot of ground in that one answer. She had communication, everything. I would say that. I think finding intentional ways to communicate. Now, communicate is not just, talking. I think that one of the things my wife mentioned is this notion that as we evolve, we met at 18, got married at 22, and now we're knocking on 50. And so the reality is that over the span of those years, 32 years, the way we communicate has to evolve. The nature of communication has to evolve, and communication also matures. The conversation we were having at 18 and 19 is surely not the conversations we're having at 50. And so I think that along with innovating and being creative, your communication style evolves over the lifetime of the relationships. And so much of it, and I could probably say one more thing that may knock out a couple of questions, Dr. Green, and it is this idea that there has to be intentionality around a commitment to evolve. Something that I know that often doesn't get talked about by many couples. I had noticed in my own counseling that you had many people divorcing once the children were adults. A lot of couples divorced at that point. And part of that is because of a reluctance to evolve in the relationship. If you raise children, the bulk of your, time is spent as a parent. Yeah, you're a couple, but as a parent, right? And so, then once the kids are gone, who've been like a mediator for so long, 21, 18, 19 years, a buffer between the two of you, then when the kids are gone, now you have to see one another in a different way. There's some practical things to that. I know for us, I mean, when our kids were both out of the house, I missed trash for like 2 straight weeks because I wasn't taking the trash out for like 16 years. I had kids, who did that. So dishes were sitting in the sink. We were like, who gonna wash those dishes? So it's little things you learn, but within the relationship, it has to be a commitment to evolve over time. Because if you don't evolve together, you evolve apart,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Even as you were talking about, how so much of the focus is the children, especially when they're, in sports and after school activities. But I would also say intimacy is really, really important in order to have a sustaining marriage, and not just physical intimacy, although that is very important as well. Physical intimacy, being able to hold hands, being able to kiss, being romantic, changing it up, in the bedroom, critical. But then also that spiritual intimacy, being able to worship together, to pray together, to practice those spiritual disciplines. And then certainly emotional intimacy is important, being able to listen to each other and understand, even when you disagree, learning to disagree, but still honor how the other person feels in the midst of the conversation. So I think intimacy is really, really important. And I think it's something that people often overlook as a way to have a healthy and sustained marriage.
Yeah. You mentioned so many great ingredients that go speak to the foundation of a healthy, loving, and lasting relationship. So we have innovation and creativity, communication, and there were a few more that you talked about in intimacy. So along those lines, right, because one of the things we talked about was being sort of busy and investing in other areas of our lives. With you two being so busy with work, obviously you're a well sought after speaker, so there are times that you do have to spend time apart. And then also with all the other things that sort of get in the way of having, and doing life. How do you cultivate trust in a relationship, especially given the course of the longevity of how long you've been together?
Yeah, I think I kept looking in the image because I seem like I'm so much higher than you. I was trying to figure out why. Yes, you slouching. Let me get it right.
I was trying to be close and lean in.
Oh, okay.
So that's what was happening.
All right. Okay. All right.
We're live, right?
I do. Okay. All right.
So, it's okay. We want to see it all.
So what was your question? No, I got it. No, I think that trust looks different. See, I guess it's interesting. If you'd asked some of these questions 20 years ago, I think my answers might have been different. But I really realized we had a serious moment, about 10 years ago, 10 years ago. So again, when the kids were grown and out the house, it became a very interesting time in our lives, so much so that we actually did a conference. We spoke at a couples conference and actually did a session on empty nesters, because this moment is a moment where a couple, if you have children, it becomes a very amazing moment. And it can also be a trying moment emotionally. I know my wife was experiencing some things because the kids were gone. I was experiencing some things. The house was so quiet, we were just there with one another. And so just like I think the relationship keys, trust is an evolutionary process as well. It looks different as you mature. There were things you were fixated on. When we're young, we're always thinking about a lot of the superficial things in relationships because we're immature. And as we get older and you start to lessen your fixation on some of those things, a lot of things that mattered ultimately, when you're young, you could be dating and together and be like, who are you looking at? Well, who are you looking at? Be walking somewhere, kind of little things. And then as time passes, that stuff changes. It's no longer, it doesn't matter. You're clear about where you are and clear about who you're with. And so even trust looks different over the time. In your trust, you learn to release some things. You learn to that the things that really matter in a relationship are often not the things that you can get sidetracked by in a relationship, you know. And I heard, we were listening to a sermon the other day by one of my mentors, Sam Proctor, an old sermon from 1983. And he says, if you really want to know how important things are in life, he said, funerals are a great way to remind you what's important in life. And as two people who've done funerals, at that moment, the finality of that moment helps you realize what is really important in life. There have been many times over the years I've done funerals, and we might have had an argument the day before, or a few days before, or the morning of. I don't know. And then in the midst of the funeral, I was like, yo, is that really worth the investment of energy I had in that moment? You know, because in a moment it can be gone. And then what? So I think, you know, I think those trust shifts, but then trust builds as you mature and you stop majoring in minors, right? And you start majoring in the critical things that sustain the relationship. That's my little piece, but go ahead, do your little piece.
No, I think what you said is absolutely right. And I think that, you know, so often we can come preoccupied with, well, what is he doing? Or what is she doing? Who is he talking to? Or who is she texting? And when the reality is, you know, for many of us, we have to develop a trust with ourselves, so that we know ourselves well enough to know what our boundaries are. And then we also have to trust in the God that brought us together. And that there it is, an investment that has been made, and that we have the responsibility, accountability of doing our best to make that investment work wherever possible. So I think that, you know, as he said, that trust evolves over time because you're trusting for many different things. You know, I'm trusting you to be honest with me. I'm trusting that we're going to work together to take care of these children. I'm trusting that we're going to, you know, work together and plan a viable future together. So trust is in so many different aspects of marriage. And I think that the longer you're together and the more you share and the more you're transparent with one another, the more you're able to trust at a different level.
Yeah. I think also, and this may speak to something else too. I think that when you're in a relationship, even when you're married, being married is no guarantee that you'll be honest about who you are, right? And it was early in our marriage that we realized part of the honesty has to do with how you share your experiences of life or the things you've gone through in life. You know, there were things about my wife when I was young I didn't understand until I understood she was a victim of sexual assault and abuse. So I didn't understand that. And at 19, 20, 21, 22, I still didn't understand it, right? I still wasn't mature enough to understand what that meant. But then as I started kind of opening up to her about things I had experienced as a child and the things I felt were challenging, problematic, I realized that, you know, that's part of trust, is being able to share your narratives, and not only share narratives, but understand how those narratives shape you individually, and then how collectively you work on those shared narratives. I'm smiling again.
Absolutely. And I just want to give some quick feedback from our audience members. Fatia said that she loves you guys. This is so inspirational. You are both an inspirational couple, and they want to thank you for sharing your story. So one of the words that keeps coming up is evolving, right? And learning how to handle one another with care as you evolve, and the abilities and the ways in which you handle trust and stress, right? But stress is sort of one of those things that we really can't get away from. And so, you know, and stress could look very different, right? It could be that someone's overwhelmed. It could be that in the moment you are trying to connect with your partner and you really aren't connecting, or something like that may be going on. So in those moments, right, can you give our audience members some advice around how to rescue your relationship from those stressful moments when either you're feeling overwhelmed or you're not connecting or you're not really sure what's happening with the other or even with yourself, right?
Yes, I think that, that's really a great question because every marriage is going to go through some type of stress at some point or another. We've often said there is no perfect marriage, and so you have to figure out what's meaningful for you and what's going to work for you. And I think a key component is recognizing when those stressors are emerging, because I know for me, when I'm stressed, I can be a little irritable, I can be a little short. And when I hear myself being short, stop, or see myself being irritable, then I have to self-correct and I have to check myself.
Right.
But if we're so busy looking at what our partner is doing wrong and what our partner is not doing, or what our partner should be doing, then we don't take that time for self-reflection. So self-reflection is really, really important part, and then recognizing what those triggers are. But I would say being intentional about time together and time apart is really key. Time together to have fun, to laugh, not just to come together to talk about the kids or to pay bills, but just to have some good old-fashioned fun together. But then also time apart. It is very healthy in a marriage to have, a good set of girlfriends or a good set of guy friends, folks that you can have fun with outside of the marriage as well. I think when we first got married, I was just so into the marriage and just holding on so tight, before I realized, well, it's important to have a strong marriage, but it's also important to have strong friends. And I said this last night, we're doing our premarital counseling. And I shared that, and recognize that you can't tell everybody everything, because you need some friends who are for your relationship, not just friends who are for you, right? Because my friends who are just for me, if I call them and have some conversation, they're going to be thinking about what's best for me. There are some family members, they're only going to be thinking about what's best for me. So make sure you have some friends in a community who's invested in what's best for y'all. Somebody that can check you when you're wrong, somebody that can let you know that you need to think again, that you need to reconsider, not someone that's going to continue to make things more challenging and more difficult. So recognize those stressors, have a way of dealing with them individually. Take a bath, relax yourself, watch some comedy, to collectively go on a date, have some fun, do something new, but then also make sure that you have good time together and good time apart.
Yeah, I'm going to add something. That was beautiful.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I want to add something to that, push a little bit into the meat of this. Because, and you said it earlier, she has a high stress job. I have a high stress job. We've been type A, high performance people for most of our relationship. Alpha male, alpha female, those stressors are real. Here's what I will say to people who are watching: when your spouse is stressed or things, and I want you perceive that, here's a big word: depersonalize. Depersonalize that. Because if you see your spouse is stressed, and I'm talking about stress individually and then collectively, but stress individually, if you personalize that and start thinking that there's something you didn't do or something you did do, that can lead to unnecessary arguments, conversations, because I can say, what's wrong? Nothing. Well, I know something's wrong. Well, what's wrong? Nothing. Well, why are you not going to say? And then all of a sudden now you compounded it to something else where she may say, I don't want to talk about it right now. I'm like, okay. But the key is if your spouse don't want to talk about it, if she said, I don't want to talk about it, okay, move on to something else. How's the weather in China? I mean, you go on a whole other conversation,
right?
And you just move on, because it's not worth. Again, I'm gonna be honest with you though, Lena, that comes with maturity, because early on you don't always say that. Because you so want your spouse to be okay. I want her to be okay, and I want to be. And sometimes you got to allow your partner to just go through that moment and not even intervene in it. And sometimes there have been times when I've seen her in a particular mood and things like that. And I said, okay, let me close the door and walk back out the room and give her space and go watch some TV. And she's done the same for me. And then I said, when there's stressors on the marriage, in the relationship, she alluded to it earlier. One, you got to be able to identify that, and then you start thinking about constructively, what do you need to do? I mean, I think about last year in particular, in the pandemic, we had not spent that much time together in a while, right?
Mhm.
And in a while. And even though people say this, even though we worked together for years at FCBC, you know, she was in her office, I was in my office, we go home, she wanted to go out with her friends, and I went out with friends. That, but when you can't go nowhere,
Right.
and you just in the house, and let me tell you, what I realized is that you realize some people, you know, there's some people say, man, marriages didn't survive COVID, you know. And then there was moments you realize, hey, we stronger than I thought because this ain't even phasing us.
Mhm.
You know, this is not even phasing us. And then you start remembering how much we met, you know, how much we enjoy spending that time together. And so you have those
Mhm.
powerful moments as well. But I think communication, depersonalized, being able to be honest about what's going on, giving one another time to process, and then
Mhm.
when stress of marriage, always communicating, find ways to ease those tensions, to you know, de-escalate tensions if you can, or sometimes just respect the space of the individual.
Yeah. Those are great. And, you know, you brought up a great point in that the pandemic has revealed quite a bit about many of the relationships that people were probably surprised to find out about themselves and their partners. And I did a little polling and asked a few people who were in some romantic relationships or in marriages. And they also wanted me to ask you all some tough questions about their relationships to see if you could share some advice with them about them. So I have two questions.
Can I say something real quick, Lena?
Sure.
I just saw a comment popped up, and it said, do y'all get on each other's nerves? Yes, not did. Did means past tense. You know,
Yes.
it should be, do y'all get on each other? Yes.
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 You know what I realized? People, you know, people think that, you know, is a utopia, right? They see you up there on in the pulpit. They see us doing work together, and they're like, oh, you know, I wish our marriage was like this. No, you don't. You know, I wish we could do it. No, you don't, because you don't know what it took to get to that point. You don't know the struggles to get there. You don't know the strife. I mean, think about it. When you're 18 years old, and here's the thing we didn't talk about. We were dating at 18, and by the time before we were 20, we were parents.
Right.
Right. So add that into it. You trying to figure yourself out, raise a child, you know, be there for somebody else. So yeah, there gonna be times there are days that, and it doesn't mean that the love is any less, but there are days, you know, you're like, man, let me just go in the other room this morning and chill, because, you know, so that's real. I think that's I think people get on a lot of these conversations and they kind of give these, you know, these false hopes to people. But I think, like any other couple, we go through the same things that everybody get on. So that was a roundabout way of saying, yeah, we still get on one another's nerves at times.
Yeah, and it's true, because I think that the other piece is that in any long-term relationship, you're going to get on each other's nerves. So whether you look at a brother and sister who love each other hard, there are going to be times when, guess what, you're going to get on each other's nerves. With your parents, with your grandparents, you know, sometimes when they're trying to, you know, tell you what to do when you're young and you think you know. So that is a part of life. With your girlfriends, your guy friends, a part of any relationship is going to be the capacity to work through whatever those periods are when you're not seeing eye to eye, when you are getting on each other's nerves, recognizing that, being able to take a step back, make a decision to do something else or go somewhere else, or, you know, engage in a different activity. But your marriage is not failing because your wife is getting on your nerves. Your marriage is not failing because your husband is not getting on your nerves. Do not be talking about, well, Pastor Lakeisha don't get on Pastor Mike's nerves like that, because I do. And he gets on my nerves. And guess what? We can say that and we can still love each other.
And laugh.
Even though you get on my nerves. Do you love me even though I get on your nerves?
I surely do.
And there it is. So you get on each other's nerves, you keep it moving, you keep talking, you keep communicating, you keep loving, because guess what? You have more fun together than you do getting on each other's nerves, hopefully.
Yes.
Yeah.
And you said something very important, right? Having more fun. So that means building up your partner's emotional bank account, right? So have so much more of those experiences than you do those negative experiences.
Hold on, Lynn.
Right.
I like that. Build emotional banker because I'm about to make some withdrawals today.
Okay. So we have some tough questions
Right.
from some of the people that I had an opportunity to speak with regard to some advice that they'd like to hear your perspective on. So what advice would you give to a couple who is living in the same household but living very separate lives, if that makes sense? So 2 parts: for the people that want to perhaps reconcile, and for the people who want to move on without having a live-in roommate. So how do you begin to communicate with that kind of separation, and what advice would you give them? And this is, again, just thinking about what has happened and what people have come to learn about themselves and their relationships, particularly during this pandemic.
You know, aside from the pandemic, I remember years ago. No, who was the person said when we were at the thing in Oklahoma about never wanting at the same time?
Never want to what?
Leave at the same time?
I don't remember.
Yes, you do.
Never want to leave what? At the
Let me
same
see.
time?
Let me see if I can remember this. We were doing a couples retreat in Oklahoma, a couples conference, and this person said,
Oh yes.
Oh, now.
I remember.
Now.
She said they were married maybe 40 or 50 years, and she said the only reason that we're still married is because we didn't want to leave at the same time. That when I was ready to leave and walk away from the marriage, my husband was fighting hard to keep us together. And when he was ready to leave and walk away from the marriage, I was fighting hard to keep us together. And so she said that was the key to the successful marriage, is that someone's always got to be willing to put in the extra work and do the fighting. And we were talking about that and saying, you know what, that's real, because we've had some strain in our marriage. I know there were some times when I felt like, you know what, I don't know if this is worth it. I know there are some times that he felt like, you know what, maybe we just need to quit and walk away. But in the midst of those times, one of us was always fighting and pushing. And that is the reality of that. And I know you were about to talk after you.
Yeah. I think one of that came to my mind. I can't remember. You would have said it much better because I didn't remember that fully.
Yeah.
But I had a couple come to me one time for counseling. And from their whole body posture, when they came into the office, it was clear they were not really here. They were there for the wrong reasons. And I just asked them, I said, do y'all both want to be in this marriage? And they both were like, absolutely not. Right. So I think that when you have a relationship where you are going in 2 different directions and it does feel like you're just living with somebody, I think honest conversation has to be had. I don't think there's no how-to on that one. There's no process on that one. You just got to be real and have to say, okay, where are we meeting? Where are there places in this relationship that we feel we can build from? Because I'll be honest with you, and she could tell you, our first year in marriage, we was ready to call it a day. We were like, look, I was tired of arguing. She was arguing. We were arguing. We were like, this ain't working. And you know, we were young. We was, I'm tired of this. And I'm telling her, I'm tired of this. She tired of it. And then what we realized is that we went from being kids to having sex. And I say kids at 18 because we are, to being parents. And we never had worked on really being friends. And we had to intentionally make the decision to build a friendship. Sometimes when you're in these spaces like the pandemic and you're together, you realize you're in 2 different spaces. You know, one is going this way and one is going that way. And all of a sudden you discover this because now you have nothing to distract you because like COVID-19. I think you have to then make a decision. Are we committed to work on the friendship? Because that care, concern, love that comes in that friendship becomes a critical building block to growing from those moments of tension, of distraction, of pain, of a problem. So I think one of the things, as you're growing apart, 1, somebody has to be fighting. 2, if nobody wants it, it's not going to happen. That's just being very honest. It's not going to miraculously happen if neither one wants it. But if you want it and want to continue to go about this, I think it becomes critical. And it's the same for that question. about unfaithfulness. You know, when you think about covenant, and we always say this in premarital counseling.
Oh, wait a minute. Before you go to
Oh,
unfaithfulness, can I just say this piece? Because
I'm
we did see that question. I wanted to say also, don't negate the effectiveness of counseling and seeking guidance. There are some things that you just can't pray your way through. And I'm just being honest. And that's me as a pastor and as a prayer warrior who loves to pray. Some things you cannot pray your way through. If I break my arm, I am not going to sit at home and try to pray my way through a broken arm, right? It is broken. I've got to go, and I'm not going to go to my pastor and ask my pastor, can you pray for my broken arm? Why? Because there have been doctors who have been medically trained to reattach that arm, to put a cast on it. They have been trained on how to heal the physical body. And so why am I going to put that kind of strain on me when I don't have that expertise? And why would I put that kind of strain on God to say, God, heal my body when there's a hospital down the street? And it's the same way with marriages.
Ooh, I like that.
When our marriages get to the place where they are broken, and they often do, sometimes we cannot pray our way through it. Sometimes you got to talk to a professional. You got to talk to your pastor. You got to go to a counselor, people who have been to school, prepared, and know how to heal broken relationships. And so don't be afraid to go to counseling. Don't be afraid to say, I need help. I don't know how to do this. Because a lot of us, we don't know how to do this. We're figuring it out as we go along, getting some advice from some of our elders, reading a book here and there, but we're figuring it out. So don't put that pressure on you to feel like you have to be the person to save your marriage. No, make the decision together to seek the help that you need. And while you're going to the counselor, pray. And while you're talking to whoever that person is, pray, but certainly make sure that you're seeking the help that's available that can help you have a better and a stronger marriage.
Yeah, I think it goes back to, and the question I was asked earlier about unfaithfulness.
Mm-hmm.
Like when we do marriage counseling, I often ask people, and this is it's different now, but I'm talking, we used to do one-on-one counseling. We do group counseling. We kind of ask the same thing. I bring it up if I do the opening session. But I would say two things. Name something that is unforgivable, you think, before you all get married, right? And, I'm not talking about some criminal act. I'm not talking about, you married someone and find out they've done some things that are criminal, and that's different. But I'm talking about within the natural course of relationship. If you say there are things that are beyond forgiveness, then you may not be ready for a covenant. I said, because a marriage is not a contract. It's a covenant you're making. A contract, when the terms of the contract are not met, you sever the contract. Now, there are things that can cause a marriage to unravel, and those are a lot of things. But in terms of unfaithfulness, it's the covenant that binds you. Doesn't mean there's no pain. Doesn't mean there's no hurt. Doesn't mean there's no wound. But what's the driving force behind the relationship, right? What is at the heart, the foundation, and the bonds that bind the two of you together? Because that is what enables you to move forward in the midst of unfaithfulness, in the midst of anything, the tentacles around that. Because if that's not there, if fundamentally at the end of the day, the unfaithfulness reveals that you two really don't like one another, you love one another, but you don't like one another, that you have nothing in common, that you're not really friends, all these other things that can come out as the tentacles of this, those are pressing issues. Those are different issues. But in the midst of that, if there's something deeper that binds you to, and you commit to saying, okay, it's going to be hard, it's going to be difficult, but we're going to press through this. It may push us to the brink of our emotional capacity, but we're going to push through this.
Yeah, such excellent points. And I just want to lift up a couple of things, right? So one, the notion that marriages are always 50-50 is a myth, right? Because sometimes one partner could be giving more than the other, right? And that's part of the contract or the covenant that you enter into when you're saying that you're going to invest in this relationship for the long haul. And then Pastor Lakeisha, you said something that I absolutely adore. My motto is prayer and therapy, right? And we have so many resources that are available, both at the church and at the Hope Center, for people to get support with either premarital counseling or for counseling, couples counseling, in both places. And so I encourage folks who are on here, who are listening to us today, to please check out what resources we have available, because we want to support you. Okay.
Oh no, I was looking at a comment. Go ahead. Any other questions?
Yeah, I was just going to say, just so you all know, there have been a couple of comments about a book, a couples book,
We've been asked about that before. We've done a lot of couple conferences and retreats, and let me tell you honestly, when we do those moments, when we've had, and I don't know,
I think we should do a couples retreat.
Yeah,
maybe 2021.
Yeah, 2021 we gotta get together.
I'm sorry, 2022. What do y'all think? Put in some comments in the chat. Would you all be interested in going away for a couples retreat?
Absolutely, because we've done a lot. And what I was about to say is that every time we do one, well, in the doing, right, we discover more things. Yeah, you know, every time we've done one together, it has led to some honest conversation. You know, sometimes even painful, but honest conversation. So I think that's critical. So I'm all for that book, retreat, all of that. We did couples in conversation a couple years ago. That was really good. So yeah.
Okay, so we have a few comments that we'd like to put up on the screen and share with you all. So we'll just let those pop up for 1 second. This is the jewels that are not dropped before you take the journey. And many people will tell you that they think what they think you want to hear, as opposed to being transparent and doing you a favor. It's a great point.
I would say though, that's why it's important to have premarital counseling, right? And make sure it's good counseling, because one of if there's any regret about our marriage, that we never had that. And I think we do it out of that now. I do so many things that if someone had just pulled my collar to or said, like we tell people now when we do counseling, listen, this is not the how to be a good husband, how to be a good wife. This is what it means to be the man. This is what it means to be a woman. That ain't our counseling. Our counseling is, here are issues that you will face in this relationship based on 30-something years of knowledge. And here's what we want to tell you. You may want to start thinking about how to engage some of these issues, how to deal with conflict, how to deal with in-laws, how to deal with intimacy, how to talk about money, how to talk about the stressors, because we've done it enough to be able to say, okay, think about it this way. Because when you don't have those conversations prior to marriage, in the midst of the marriage, there's this illusion that all things will just work themselves out because y'all love each other. You can love it. There are many people, and my wife can tell you, there are many people who've gotten divorced who loved each other, but could not stay in that relationship anymore, but loved each other, right? So love is not the be all the time. There's other pieces that are not really dealt with in the midst of it.
That's right. And I think some of those things, that's such a great point. One is not getting the support that you need before making those decisions. And also too, I think, you know, folks can love each other, but also not be a good match. And I don't think we talk about that enough, about people just not being a good fit for one another. And thinking about what exactly is a good fit when you're thinking about who's a good fit for you, right? They could be a great person, but not the great person for you.
Yeah. And you know what? He said something I just wanted to piggyback on, which is, you know, be thoughtful and careful about who you're taking advice from. Right? Because their relationship is not your relationship. They have been through things that you haven't been through, and you have been through things that they haven't been through. So they may not have the exact answer for your specific situation. Is it okay to talk and listen? Absolutely. But don't take someone else's recipe and think it's going to work perfectly for you the way it worked for them, because they were in a different context. I can talk to somebody who's been married for 30 years and ask them some advice. But if I ask them for advice on a day when they're angry with their husband, that advice might look very differently on that day than it would on a day when they're absolutely in love and things are going great. So even marriages, you know, can be emotional. And so be thoughtful about listening to other people sometimes. And this is just a side note, right? This is a footnote. We are just looking for people to tell us what to do. Well, he didn't do this. What should I do? He didn't do that. What should I do? We want someone to tell us what to do because we don't want to take responsibility and accountability for our own relationships. So then we're looking outside for what we already have internally. We're looking for somebody to tell us what we already know we need to do. And then we end up taking some bad advice and then it makes things worse. So be thoughtful and careful about who you're seeking relationship advice from, because depending on the day and depending on the mood and depending on what's happening in their marriage at that time, you may not get the best advice.
Yeah, and I mean, we rolling right now, so let me just keep it rolling. So I think that, you know, and let me speak on the spiritual side of this too, because we're pastors, we're preachers, spiritual leaders, and one of the things that people forget is we think, okay, we love the Lord and we believe in God and we follow the teaching of Jesus, all will be well, right? Well, in Genesis, you know, and I shared this a few weeks ago, that when God created, he invites, you know, Adam to name. In other words, you know, they're co-creators in that moment, right? And I think it's the same thing. We can believe God brought us together. And we have seen, let me pause for a second, time out. We have seen moments and experienced moments where we absolutely unequivocally know that God was moving. And listen, I mean, where we know that in the midst of what was happening in life, God was make some things were happening because of God. All right, I'm gonna give some examples later, but just because you know God is present and you believe in God and you trust the Lord doesn't mean that you don't have the responsibility to co-create in that moment. You're creating something new. When people get married, when I say at that moment, when he blessed the rings, and I say, you know, you all have journeyed two separate paths. Now you're coming together. You're coming from your path. You're coming from your path. And now you're committing to forging something new. Every marriage, we would like this idea, and I say this all the time. We would like to believe, and I think we were when we were very young. You know, we're married now. Oh my God, I love her, and we think that we like this. This is it. We're here. We thick as thieves. We're bonded. And I tell everybody, marriages don't work like this. Here's where you start. We don't want to be honest about it, but here's where you start. All right, and then eventually, over time, through work, through commitment, through love, through work, and then it gets here. It don't start there, because you have different cultural backgrounds, different experiential backgrounds that you're bringing together in this marriage. And a lot of it is territorial that you start the relationship out with, because we young. Look, we tell everybody now, we fought in the beginning of this marriage over toothpaste. You hear me?
And I'll say this too, in terms of that cultural piece, that is so critical, because you know, even when we were dating, I was always telling him, stop yelling at me. Stop yelling at me. Yes. And he would say, I'm not yelling at you. And I'm like, you're yelling at me. And, you know, I didn't understand. Why are you yelling at me? Until I went and visited him. I went to his grandmother's house, and his cousins were there and his uncles were there. And I had gone upstairs to use the restroom. And while I was in there, I heard all this commotion. I was like, oh my God, they're down there fighting. I mean, it was screaming, it was yelling. They were just talking over each other. You couldn't hear anybody. And when I went downstairs, they were having the best time. I was ready to run. Like, what are these I'm from Texas. What are these New Yorkers doing? What's going on here? But they were just having the best time, but they talking over each other, cutting each other off, yelling loud. And so I came to realize, I looked at him and said, oh, you really aren't yelling at me, are you? You know?
No.
And it was a cultural difference.
Look, man.
That was real.
Look, man. I'm a beige young. You hear me? And so we talk loud. We talk loud, man. We talk loud. So we were and when I went upstairs, she was crying. I was like, what's wrong with you? So, oh my God, I was like, what? I was like, we're not fighting. I was like, we're not even fighting. We having a good time. But she thought, and I used to get upset when we would talk, and she would tell me I was yelling. But honestly, I wasn't yelling. And it was just my upbringing. And part of it was also that I was like the only child in the house with a bunch of adults. And to just be in the mix, I had to like speak up, right? so it was just what it was. But it is cultural differences, right? The other thing, and I was talking about the toothpaste. This is real, not the brand of toothpaste. I'm gonna be clear. Somebody said toothpaste is important, and don't touch my comb or brush. But the issue was that, you know, sometimes I would leave the cap right, off the toothpaste. And she would be fussing because, I mean, she was really upset.
It's hard toothpaste.
And she'd be really like she'd be really going in on the toothpaste.
Can you please put
this is when we first got married now, not now. We passed that, you know, but she was really going in on the suitcase and on toothpaste. I was like, just put the cap on. She was like, well, why you leave it off? And then we kept going. And then that was that. But then the other issue was the toilet seat. Yes. You know, he fussing at me about the toilet seat. Put the toilet seat back down. My answer was, do you back in the bathroom with your eyes closed? Did you not see that the toilet seat was up? That's what I have to deal with. So it was all those things. And then I realized as I got older, a lot of these things were territorial. Yeah. We would try, and it doesn't have to be age, because I do this with older people get married. Yes. Right? We get territorial, and it becomes, and you know what it came into, Lena? Well, I'm a grown man. You can't tell me X, Y, Z. I'm a grown woman. I didn't say grown. I said grown man. You know, that little other word. And then that was that. But then, as you matured, he was like, wait a minute. This is really, we talking about toothpaste right now. Like, we really talking about toothpaste. We talking about pies. We talking about the toilet seat. And it became more important to get past that stuff. And once you realize you don't have to be territorial, that's part of the first few years, maybe, relationship of trying to make this kind of, how do you appropriate one another's culture, understanding, right? And create something new, not lose. There's no losing in the marriage. I lost what I did. And there's no winning. My wife will tell you, I used to, and to this, I used to love arguing. Well, I guess you could tell that. Not, you know, arguing to me was like, you know, I had to win.
Competition.
Yeah. I had to win.
We can imagine what those robust conversations. So listen, we have about a minute and a half left. So I want to be mindful of the time. We're having such a great time. But I want to give you all an opportunity to do what I like to call a turn towards moment with one another. So we know that, you know, it's important to articulate, you know, the most important things about why you love your partner and some of the unique things that you adore about them. So I want to give you both an opportunity as we close in these last minute or two to share what are some of the things that you most appreciate about your partner?
Go ahead, tell me.
Oh, now you want me to go first?
Yeah, tell me what you appreciate.
You know what? I appreciate your brilliance. I appreciate your intelligence. I appreciate your creativity. I appreciate your passion and your romance. I appreciate who you are as my husband and as my pastor, but I most appreciate who you are as my friend.
That's it?
She said we had a minute and a half. I was trying to take up my 45 seconds.
Let me say this. So I'm gonna say this. There's a lot of things I could say about my wife. You didn't look at me. You was halfway at the screen looking at me. So this is what our life is like, by the way, man. You need to know that. So my wife is an optimist. Her optimism has redeemed so much in our life together. Her positive outlook has restored the moments when my pessimism could have undermined some things, right? That optimism flows from a deep stream of love and care and compassion. There's so many things about her character that I admire. Her tenacity, her perseverance, the way she gets things done, the way she stays focused, has been mind-blowing in our relationship. But it's her optimism, you know, and that optimism has led her to be my nurse. People who know my health condition, this is primary nurse right here. She's taking care of me more than any other nurse I've had in the hospitalizations. It's that optimism. Now, sometimes optimism can get on your nerves. I want to say, and I know we got like,
that is not what this part
I know
is.
we got like no seconds left, but I got to give her, show how optimistic she is. Lena, I was in a hospital literally bleeding to death. I was bleeding to death in 2005. I had a surgery and the wound was hemorrhaging. And I mean like blood shooting out of my side type hemorrhaging. And it was a high trauma situation right in the hospital, in the room, in the hospital bed. They didn't have time to move me. The doctors came in and said they had to stitch me up immediately. Now, the nurse went running to get lidocaine to give me anesthetic for my side where they had to stitch up. And they came back, used it. It wasn't enough. He said, I need more. The nurse said, we don't have any more on the floor. She had to run down and get some. This was all like a very heavy panic situation. Meanwhile, I'm bleeding. My blood is pooling under me. And he looked at me and he said, I got to stitch him up, like with no anesthetic. I got to start this now before he bleeds to death. And they start stitching. And I cannot begin to tell you the pain. Like I had a towel. I felt like I was like in a Civil War or something. I'm biting this towel. But my wife, the eternal optimist, in that moment, started singing hymns, right?
It was either sing hymns or break down and cry. And I was not about to break down and cry. He was in too much pain. So I had to go with what I knew.
And let me tell you what I said. I said, I don't hear no damn song. I was like,
I was putting a praise on it. I was believing that it was going to work so that years later we could be right here having this conversation with y'all right now. So I was putting a praise on it in advance.
But I'm telling you, I'm going to tell you, but that made the difference. It was her optimism because it did, and I passed out, by the way. So, I passed out to the, you sang me to Night Night. You sang me to Night Night. But
I didn't sing you to Night Night. The doctor was stitching you to Night Night.
Yeah. But no, honestly, I think those are the things. Who she is has been as a wife, a mother, her love, her enduring optimism, her commitment, who she is as a woman of God, who she is as a teacher, a mother, a nurturer, a caregiver, a lover, all those things. I mean, so, but it above everything else, her optimism has been grounding for our marriage.
Okay. Well, we have to end there. I don't even know if there's anything else we need to say. People are calling for a part 2, so we'll have to revisit this conversation at some point down the line. But I want to thank you both so much for sharing the gift of your wisdom and your counsel and being transparent about your own love and marriage and relationships with all of us. So we thank you so much. We thank our audience. And this has been Love Notes. And we thank you for just giving us your time tonight, even though we went past an hour. So again, thank you so much for joining us for Love Notes, Principles for a Lasting Romantic Relationship. Have a great night.
Good night.
Peace, y'all.